One of the 7 knowledge areas of product mastery is market research, my personal favorite because it provides the tools and techniques for understanding the unmet needs and desires of our customers. This is one of the most important responsibilities product managers have, but not all of us are sufficiently involved with customer research or are using the most appropriate tool at the right time. Market research isn't a one and done sort of activity. It needs to occur throughout an innovation project. In the next few minutes, you'll deepen your understanding for using the right tools at the right time. Our guest is Chip Shulman. He's president and managing principal at AMG Research, a research-based consulting and insights company based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Chip brings more than 20 years of experience in marketing and sales, and over that time has been involved in more than 1,000 market research studies. His degrees are in bioengineering and mechanical engineering, which explains in part his special interest in helping medical and industrial businesses in new product development, pricing, segmentation, and market analysis. Let's jump in and learn the ins and outs of market research. Also, we created an article format of this discussion for you. You'll find that at productmasterynow.com/504.
How can you unlock your full potential as a product manager? We're sharing the product management insights you need. They are based on the 7 research-backed knowledge areas for product mastery. You'll learn to create products customers love, enhance your influence, and elevate your career. Welcome to Product Mastery Now, hosted by Dr. Chad McAllister, product management professor, practitioner, and your guide.
Chip, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So this thing I call product mastery, it comes from PDMA's Body of Knowledge. I've been a contributor to all of the versions of the Body of Knowledge over the years, and a co-author on the most recent one. That this area, market research, is about that notion of how do we understand what customers want, right? How have you found that part of the Body of Knowledge helpful to you?
I think what I've found is that the market research module in particular does a good job of outlining what type of research, what type of approach, why would you do research, and presents it in a way for people that maybe aren't intimately knowledgeable about market research. Maybe they're on the periphery, maybe they've never conducted it. And it's a good sort of documentation of what you need to think about and what you need to do. I had contributed a few times to the content and others as well. And I think it does a good job of sort of outlining all the basic things that you need to know to give you a good general overview. What I find particularly maybe interesting in it, being since I'm deep in knowledge of market research, is I always find going back to it and seeing the interrelationships between the modules. So for example, what I find really helpful is looking at other sections in the book of knowledge, things like strategy, things like your environment and your team, because I find that the interactions between is what becomes really meaningful. Just to give like a simple example of that, there's a concept in a different module. It's not actually in the market research module, but it has a double diamond approach, where it starts with you want to get information or you want to get things that are very wide. When you're thinking of design, you want to think of all possibilities, and then you want to start narrowing that down. And then as you're creating solutions, you want to think wide again and then narrow it down. And I find that there's a lot of analogy to market research because in a lot of ways that's exactly what we do. So that's what I find really interesting is just being able to take the interrelationships between the modules.
Yeah, excellent. I like that you mentioned too something I think we may forget about some of the time, which is why do research in the first place? I'm currently involved with a group training about 122 of their people involved in innovation, and the question came up recently about, well, why isn't there more of a focus on supply side innovation, which I might think of as more technology-driven innovation because it's often from a technology perspective. Because it seems like you talk a lot from the demand side, from the customer side perspective. And sure, we can create products that we dream up that we think will add value to the world, but without knowing that the customers actually have that problem, we risk creating a product no one actually wants. And so why we do this is kind of a good thing to stop and think about.
Yep, exactly. Unfortunately, I've seen lots of cases where even in organizations where you would think are pretty advanced and think through that, it's surprising sometimes the lack of research or the lack of
Hmm.
really truly understanding sort of the customer or the user's perspective of things that get pretty far advanced because from a technology standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. From an engineering standpoint, it's like, oh, we can really do this. But not really understanding how the values that, perceives it, do it, you can lead yourself astray a lot. And even today, a lot of the things I see, things progress pretty far down the line sometimes before it's like, wow, should have really discovered that earlier in the process.
Right. Right.
Supply is an interesting one too on the supply side because if you think about it, you can really go back and there are problems to be solved on the supply end of things too if you really view that problem as similar to your customer. It's just your customer
Mm.
is a little bit different. It's an internal or it's what's on the supply. But the same process would work.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
yeah, understanding the needs of the
good point.
customers. Excellent. So, Mission PDMA is where this body of knowledge originates, the Product Development Management Association. They have a conference coming up in September, which I plan to be at. Are you going to that one too?
I actually am not going to do that in September. Fortunately, for me, my wife's a teacher, so September is the busiest time of her entire time,
Right.
so I try not to travel. But I actually like to participate in a lot of the local events. So I
Hmm.
happen to be in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. One of the things we have and that the local chapter of PDMA is heavily involved in is Pittsburgh Product Camp, which is like the unconference. It's presenters who are bidding to try to present at the conference about
Oh, how
product
fun.
innovation and things like
Yeah.
that. So that's usually a once a year, and I like to participate and help with that event as well.
Yeah.
But
It, it,
unfortunately, the timing of the annual convention doesn't align for
doesn't
me.
fall well for you. Yeah, you've been involved in this association. I have as well. This is the professional association for product managers, and it's where I learned most of the things I know beyond the practical experience, right? Anyone that wants to check out that conference, just go to pdma.org. It is in September, and this year it's in St. Louis. So if you come, say hi. I'd be glad to meet you. Let's talk about this notion of understanding what customers want. How should we be using market research to accomplish this?
Well, that's an interesting question because it's a broad question
Hmm.
in terms of there are a lot of tools, techniques, technologies for market research these days. And so there's no right, wrong, definitive answer. I think a lot of things contribute to that. What we try to do, I try to do is to get organizations, product managers to think about it more as a process and the steps that you want to do rather than, oh, a task of I need to get customer insight. I need to do this one time. I need to figure it out. Instead, it really should be a organizational process system. And so what I mean by that is when you're on the very early stages of product development, the
Mm.
tools and things that you use are going to be very different than when you're at the latter end of that. So I had mentioned before a little bit about a double diamond, and it's very applicable for market research for product development. So as an example, at the front end of research, it's really about just trying to understand, being able to understand the customer, being able to understand not only their viewpoints, but how they use things, why they do what they do, how do they make decisions. Even understanding a market or a space sometimes is part of the mission. And it's amazing that you can do that fairly quickly if you're talking to pretty knowledgeable people in that area. Example, I do a lot of work in healthcare, med tech areas. Oftentimes, I don't know a lot about a particular expertise or specialty. And so, even by doing some 1 hour, it could be virtual or in person interview with a specialist of
Hmm.
really being able to talk to them, it's quite incredible amount of information that you can learn in a very short amount of time by talking to the customer. I talk to, for example, plastic surgeons, or they could be orthopedic surgeons or things like that, about topics that I'm just learning about what they do and how they, but it's like picking their brain of why they make the decisions that they do. And so that tends to be like being very broad, like I want to learn the space. What we're trying to then do is say, well, what are problems to be solved? What are the pain areas? What are the things that are issues that would derive value or benefit to them? And so that becomes maybe sometimes you have to sort of narrow it down. Okay, well, we can't think of the world, but within this, where are there particular concerns, frustrations, things like that, or opportunities, problems to really be solved for it? Mm-hmm. And then, so that's the front end. But then after that, it's how do we turn those into ideas or thoughts of what technology or a product or concepts are? And again, we want to think very broadly of it, and our research sort of conveys that too. We want to be investigating a number of different things, but the point of the research is to say, okay, well, which of these really resonates? Which of these really is driving? How do we tweak it? How do we make it better? And so we're sort of, again, broadening. Maybe we've missed a little bit, but we're broadening. Maybe there's other things adjacent to that. And then as you work down, now we want to get narrow again to be like, well, how do we prioritize that? So those types of things are what we're looking at as a process, very similar to our product development process, but in market research terms of collecting specific types of information and how to do that. So.
Yeah. So on that front end part, right, when we're trying to understand what the customer's unmet needs are, or their underserved needs. Back to PDMA, I remember one of the keynote speakers was the CEO of Gatorade, and she described a time when Gatorade was rapidly losing market share to a competing brand that came on the scene, and the company was not headed in the. And she said, "We changed the entire direction of the company based on 12 interviews with high school athletes." Right? Which was a very powerful statement. And I've been involved in doing enough research that I totally get why that's valid. That 12 interviews, you can collect a lot of information about these athletes had needs before they worked out. They had additional needs besides Gatorade when they work out. They have needs post-workout for recovery. And that was the starting of a new journey for Gatorade. I don't know if there's, because of the work you do, I don't know if there's an example you can share or not, but examples always help us kind of connect this if you could take us through something.
Sure. I think the statement is like spot on. And I'm going to say it this way, because I think there's an idea that, market research, to do that needs to be a big, huge effort. It needs to be very big. But in some cases, just like that example, and find it to be true as well. If I talk to 12 of the right people and input, it's amazing the amount of information in that you can collect. That's not overwhelming. So I always like, you don't have to make it an overwhelming process. That's why companies don't do it sometimes. But getting the right people, the right discussion, and the right input makes a huge impact, or can make a huge impact. I have actually, I work in a lot of different industries, and probably have examples within a number of different industries for it. Oftentimes what you find is what you may think is deriving value for a customer is actually not the thing that's driving the value. It's other things that are driving value. As an example, I conducted a study. It was in the industrial market, and it was looking at sensitivity of different gases and things like that. And the product concept was that it was the most accurate. It had an accuracy to it. It had sensitivity of exact, and it could do that technology better than anything else. Therefore, it should be better than all other products. Mm-hmm. Well, in particular applications where they're in, the improvement in accuracy didn't drive the value because they were perceived it's pretty accurate now. Right? But some of the other things that came along with it in terms of its applicability, its ability to do things of detecting certain different types of gases in this case, and identifying more specificity And being able to do it allowed them to use a different material that allowed it to be less heavy, had other features to it. That actually was what drove value, because it wasn't actually the intent of what it was designed for, it was these other things. I think it would have been a huge miss, because it would have been, if you had marketed it and presented it as being more accurate, that would not have been a successful product.
Right.
Changed the whole focus of it. And I think others have specific examples you can think of where it's surprising of what derives that value sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a game changer if you obtain that.
Yeah. So it sounds like to me what you're saying, maybe this product, if we pick a scale, it was providing a 90% quality for something to the customer and says, hey, we're making it 98%. We can do 98%. Our competitors are only doing 90. And the customers, their response is 90 is good, right? We don't want to pay more because this does everything we need. And they completely missed a unmet need. If they would not have communicated, we can also detect these other things that you're interested in, right? So understanding what customers are actually valuing becomes really important to us. What was the research to figure that out?
So in that case, a lot of what we do is we started and we conduct interviews. In this case, it was one-on-one interviews. They were done virtually. They're about an hour long or so to go through and be able to, it starts out sort of general of a structured type interview where it's really understanding what's driving value, what their need is, but then picking in particular areas where, in this case, we had a concept or an idea of what it was, and presenting that and understanding what their real value is and how that's viewed and why. And interesting, then the second part of it was using slightly different tools. It was a quantitative study, and this one was done by a survey research, but used what's called conjoint analysis or trade-off analysis. And the reason that's important is that what conjoint analysis does as a tool is it puts the customer in a realistic sort of environment or decision process. They have to, I want a little bit more of one thing, a little at the expense of something else. The key for the first part is we use the qualitative research because we uncovered a lot of, there's other value to it. We put that into the conjoint analysis because we learned that in the front end, and then we were able to sort of show the point of how much value that would have and how much people would be willing to pay for it. And so then it became a much more convincing argument to management, because we are in some ways being disruptive to management, because we're saying, you're wrong. This is what really drives it, and here's sort of the evidence for it. So two different tool sets to do that. But it's a very convincing thing at the end.
Yeah, to have that data. So you did the qualitative analysis first, which was based on interviews to understand what actually drives value, what is important to the customer. And then you followed that up with a conjoint analysis, which is also talked about in the body of knowledge as a tool for making these trade-off decisions. Like the example I think is actually in the book is about, I'm not sure. I wrote an example. I'm not sure if I wrote it for the book or not. Is about a bicycle, and do you want the lighter weight? Do you want the smaller compact size? Do you want the comfortable upright riding position? Right, and whatever the factors are that we think offers some value to customers, and then we find out what's the right configuration through the conjoint analysis.
Exactly.
That sort of thing. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a good tool, or there's similar other tools that do that as well, but it's a good tool for that.
Good. And then just kind of in general, it sounds like we're starting with some qualitative research. Virtual interviews, if we can meet face-to-face, great. Virtual interviews work well through tools like this that we're using right now, a video type conference. Then a quantitative analysis, in this case for trade-off decisions. What are some of the other key tools that you find yourself using along the way?
So on the front end of things, where we're investigating things, we use a lot of things that are a combination of, a little depends on what we're looking for, but I say the first part, if you're really trying to understand something in the early stages, is to go out and see the customer in their own environment. So ethnographic type research. And I say that because probably if you're learning and you don't know the space very well, it's the best way that you will truly understand a customer, right? In their own environment, in their own day, and how they use a product or how they use what they currently do. So you do use ethnography, especially in the early stages of things. Surprisingly, and there's a lot of debate about, we use a lot of focus groups. And I'm going to sort of caveat that because it may or may not be what everybody thinks as a focus group. And I'll give you an example. I particularly don't like, in a lot of cases, what we consider a traditional focus group, which would be, I'm going to invite 8 to 12 people, sit down in a conversation, and I'm going to do a very structured focus group like that. The reason I say that is that's a lot of people to do things. I think the real value is getting some shared information, some shared thought. But what I find much more effective, say, in product development research, is having very small group sessions, similar people. So a lot of the groups I do are 3 people, 4 people, where it's a sort of collaborative, where people are adding things, ideas, thoughts. In an environment of 3 to 4 people, the natural human nature tendency is to be more willing to challenge what other people think. Because when you're in a group environment, there's sort of a group thought idea. Well, geez, if this person said it, I probably shouldn't say anything. But in a small group, the dynamic's very different because everybody feels that their opinion is very powerful and meaningful. And so this is an example of what I see is using the same idea, the same value of a focus group, just really making it smaller to get more collaborative. And that really works well because sometimes it's people thinking together, especially if they're in the same area, the same specialty, same time, and getting them, it's actually sometimes an improvement rather than just a one-on-one conversation because they really truly can get the juices flowing per se. So those are some very good techniques and some very good things to do.
And just to reinforce that, I have talked to practitioners who have been very successful doing that. They still call them interviews. So I haven't heard them call them focus groups, but with 2 people, right? So you're at 3 to 4.
Right.
They're with 2. And they've moved to that, they said, because in an interview, you're talking to the person, which is helpful. But when you have 2 people, they start talking, like you said, they start talking with each other and kind of reminding them of perhaps other problems or other insights or situations. And it kind of brings out more richness because you have 2 people with the same sort of need or problem that are now interacting with each other, exploring it together with you.
Yep, I find that to be true. So those are dyads, triads, or even 4 people, but that interaction is really valuable in the process.
Excellent.
Yep.
Okay, and then if you move on to other quantitative sort of tools, you mentioned Conjoint. What are some of your other go-to tools that you find helpful?
So one of the things with conjoint analysis it does is it's a very quantitative metric, which makes it a good tool to get more sort of conclusive information. A lot of times when we're doing that, the conjoint has some restrictions to it in the design. So in a lot of cases in product development, it's not a question of, if we go to our bicycle example, how would you like it to be sit up front? Would you like to lean over? It's a trade-off, like you have different options. But unfortunately, that's not always the case with a lot of products. It's not a lot of options that way. I could design things that I just need to know, do they value this more than something else in those? So we use a technique that I find very useful that works sort of like conjoint, just simplifies it, which is called MaxDiff, maximum difference scaling. It's conjoint technique. It's used quite readily within market research, and it's a nice technique for doing that because forces people to, again, to make trade-offs of what's really important to them. So from a technique standpoint, that's, I think, works very well. A lot of times when you're further along in the process, there's two parts. One is we're starting to get things that are more concept driven. We're testing things. We have developed some ideas of what we want to do, and we're testing those ideas. And we're going through a process of saying, how do we iterate on them? How do we prioritize? How do we get concepts down to the best 2 or 3? So that tends to be a lot of the things in that is being able to clearly articulate and sort of define what that is. And the good example I can give of that is if you ask an engineer about a product a lot of times, they can very accurately describe to you the features that it has and why that feature is in there, why they developed it, and this is why it's very important, and can articulate that well. But in reality, what we want from the customer is not the features, we want the value that's derived from it, or we want the benefit. And so it's a lot of times getting it and presenting it in a way that is aligned with understanding what the value is. Okay, so a lot of it is in that description and how you formulate it and how you design that to test it. Things can be done quantitatively, usually like those are surveys, but you can do other methods too. Surveys just seems to be a very easy one to do. Get a lot of response for a more efficient process, quicker, faster, less expensive.
As long as you have well-formed questions, which is easy to mess up.
Exactly. That's the art of it.
Yep.
Usually a lot of times what we're trying to do in these stages too, as you get to the back, is understanding that value and understanding the willingness to pay for that value. Mm-hmm. Because you're making the decisions about what's going to be successful. So different pricing types of methodologies work well. I don't just uncover what they want, but actually what they're really valuing.
Okay, which is a good segue because I have a question from a listener dealing with pricing that I wanted to ask you about, and we'll do that in just a moment. First, I do pay for this podcast because of the training that I do. I have had many offers to have sponsors and tend not to engage in those at this point. But I do want to tell you about the training because it really is designed to help product managers and leaders. And there are 3 courses that I provide for such people. For the listeners, the one I want to focus on today is really to help you build up your product management and leadership skills. And also in the process, you can earn, if you wish, professional certification from PDMA, which we were talking about a moment ago. It is training that prepares you for product mastery by teaching you the 7 knowledge-backed areas from PMA for professional product managers and leaders. Those are the ones I've taken to turn into my product mastery system. Most people who take this training already have several years of experience. They know a lot already, and the Rapid Product Mastery Experience, the RPM Experience course, integrates that knowledge and really adds to it for you. It creates a reliable framework for you to think about the interrelationships between what you need to know and what you already know. And if you're serious about creating more value for customers, improving your team, and growing your own career, the RPM Experience is for you. Go to productmasterynow.com to learn more about the training and get started. That is productmasterynow.com. And Chip, let me ask you about this question that I was talking with a listener earlier this week, and we were talking about this upcoming interview and about pricing a little bit. And the question is, I found many models for pricing a product and would like to know what is working best now. What are your tips for determining the price of a new product?
Okay. It's a good question. It's one that we address a lot in the course of what we do. And it's one that there's a lot of depth to, I would say, too. Because there's a lot of different ways, as mentioned in the question, there's a lot of different ways to analyze price, how you should price products. And it's not to say that one in particular this is the best way, because it somewhat depends on what you're trying to do. So I'll explain it. It's like this one. It's interesting, I find, in working with product development teams, product management teams, when we talk about price, and usually if I would go to especially an engineering student or an engineer or something, and we talk about price, how would you price something? The most common answer, that it's a very logical answer, you think, is that they think, well, if I knew what the cost was, I could determine what the price would be. And so the point of the matter is that cost and price really don't have a relationship together, right? Other than maybe a minimum price that you might be willing to charge. So cost-based pricing is not what is a good technique or tool to do. And it is hard to sometimes to get an engineer to think out of that, because that's a logical idea for it. What matters is understanding differential value, right? So what I mean by that is, what is the value created from an idea? What is the benefit to it, and how valuable is it? When I am thinking of price, and I'm talking to somebody who maybe doesn't have a lot of experience, I try to bring a very simple example. And one of the examples I use quite often is, I'm an engineer, so I can associate. I say, I have a mechanical pencil. Okay. And I just use this as an example to think about. There are tons of different pencils. Pencils have been around forever. You can have a Ticonderoga pencil, a yellow with the traditional number 2 pencil lead, and you can say, well, that costs X number of dollars, or cents in this case. But I have a mechanical pencil developing. There's a lot of different choices of mechanical pencils. Okay. So what is it? How would I determine what I would price this at? Well, I have to do a few things. I have to really understand first, okay, what is different about this mechanical pencil than other mechanical pencils? And so, again, a lot of times engineers would look at it and say, well, it has this rubber mechanism on it. It has this clip that makes, okay, it has an eraser that does it. But that's not the right way to describe it, because I price it for that. I don't price it for the clip. I don't price it. What do you get? It's more comfortable to do it. If I'm somebody who's writing all the time, I think people who write all the time can remember you get a little bit pain in your finger from doing it. I'm always running out of the eraser, so it's frustrating. I need to go and buy, for those who are old like me, remember buying an old eraser, and I have an old separate eraser, right? So I now no longer have a need for that. It's understanding what really truly differentiates it. But more than that's great. But I know there's a lot of people that would say, but if I could pay 25 cents for it, why would I ever choose something different, right? I can always get that yellow pencil. So I need to do another thing. I need to find the customer who values the things that are differentiated. And so what I mean by that is, not everybody will buy this mechanical pencil. I'm not trying to convince somebody who's buying a 25 cent pencil because it's the cheapest thing. They're not probably the one who's going to buy this mechanical pencil. Who is it that values what it is that's differentiated? And so I need to understand customer segmentation. I need to understand and really figure out of who the right people are, what the differentiation is, and who is it that values it. And then the third thing I need to understand is, for the people who value the things that are differentiated, how much are they really willing to pay for that added value? Because personally, I would pay 10, 15 times what that Ticonderoga pencil is, because I would buy this for it because of what we do, if I truly value that. So if you use the model that says, let's compare it to price today, and I said, well, this would be 2x the price, I'm really missing it. because the answer might be 10x or 15x the price.
Mm-hmm.
But if I truly understand what's driving value, that's what I need to do. It's a nice learning tool. It's very simple, but it's to explain the idea of how you need to think about it. A mechanical pencil example works very well. The answer, though, is exactly that in practice. I need to a good pricing research is not pricing or collecting research about everybody, but identifying those who really value something and then using your methodology to say what it is that they are willing to pay.
Right.
And there are a number of well-known, well-developed pricing methodologies that you can research, and there might be in the PDMA thing, things like a Granger approach, or point analysis, or Van Westendorp, or for those who really are knowledgeable about market research, there are a number of different tools that are applicable. But I think if I were to give advice to like a product development, it's yes, those tools, you can figure and work those tools, and somebody who's experienced in market research can help you develop those. But I think from a thought process, you really want to understand what it is you're trying to do, understand just the basic of how do we do that. So
Yep.
That's usually what I would recommend, how I talk about it. What we're trying to do, and I think what's important, is understanding value-based pricing,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what we're really understanding, and you need to understand and derive what the value is. And I'll add one extra thought to it,
Sure.
because when we say that, we think of a product, but one must always remember that a product does not exist alone in a lot of cases. In a lot of examples, you have a product portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
You have different products that may be good, better, best, or different things. A lot of pricing analysis should be or needs to be done on portfolio pricing,
Right.
as opposed to thinking of a product in a vacuum. And so a lot of things that we do are modeling, how to model to do portfolio pricing. And so that's the type of thing. So you do have to adjust the tool of what you're doing to your situation.
Yeah, really good. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I sometimes forget about this. The people are buying, especially businesses, might be buying a cluster, a package of products in some sense, and that portfolio makes a big difference. I remember when I was in a startup and new product to the market, I have no idea how to price this. It was a B2B product, and we went through a number of exercises developing a series of return on investment calculators to try to demonstrate the value that we thought was in the product, and then validate that through discussions with customers about do they recognize that value too, that you buy this for this price and look at the return on your investment, how many 10x's you get by saving dollars other places.
Exactly. Yep.
So good value
And
exercise.
there's a lot of way to determine that value. Like
There's a lot of details, and this
a lot
is
of
why people
details.
can contact you to find out how to get help navigating this. But first, we do like innovation quotes. I asked you to bring one that was kind of meaningful to you and tell us what it means.
Sure. So my goal today was to maybe come up with your shortest quote. That was my goal. That wasn't my goal. But there's one that I think that's short. It's very short and sweet, but has a lot of applicability.
Mm-hmm.
It's simply, what is your why? This goes back to a very old TED Talk, and I can't remember who actually gave it, but
Yeah, go ahead and tell me what it is. I might be able to help you.
it goes back to it's talking about Apple and the way that Apple really thinks about their business. And it's really about understanding the why. Why, there's a reason that I think, it's one thing, I'm a simple person, not that complicated, and so having something very simple helps me to focus on. I can remember, what is my why? And the reason I think that's really apropos is I've used it many times to even look at my own business. And it works this way. Why am I in business? Why does AMG Research exist? What is it that we do? Okay. Well, in one way you could say what we do is market research. But that is a very inaccurate statement of what a company is. And why I get up every morning.
Mhm.
Why are we here? We're here because I'm passionate about the fact that we can help companies make better informed, better business decisions about products, about markets, what they do, by having the right information to inform and the right analysis and thought to inform that decision. And that we can help to do that. We can bring information that'll help companies do that. And our mission is to help companies and our clients on making better decisions. What do? We happen to do market research to fulfill that mission.
Mm-hmm.
We could do something else to do it, but our mission is to help our clients make better, more informed decisions. And I think that's a good way of looking at it. If you can't understand very clearly why it is that you exist, then I think and if I expand that to product innovation and product development and management, I think constantly looking at a product or what you're looking at and saying, why? Not what it does, but why is it important? Why is it different? Why is it going to make an impact to things? Why? Really understanding sort of the essence of it. And sometimes you're surprised by what you find. The essence of something isn't the specific things that it does. Sometimes it's how it makes somebody feel. So it's the emotion behind it. Sometimes it's eliminating frustration. It's the soft thing. Sometimes it's economical. But it's, again, constantly looking at the why. And then there's a third reason I like this particular quote, is that in market research, and I remind people of this all the time, I can be very annoying because I am in the business, market research is in the business of asking questions. That's pretty much what we do. And you can ask a lot of questions, what, where, when, etc. But probably the question by far that's most important in market research is why. Why does somebody do something? Why do they make decisions? Why are they doing this? Why do they value it? And so it's very apropos in market research as well, because that, in essence, is the question in most cases that we're asking and that we really, truly want to understand. And so I think it's, for such a short quote, it has a lot of application.
There's a lot of depth and a lot of applications, absolutely. And as you were describing first about the quote, I remember a TED Talk with Simon Sinek and a big white pad in front of him where he drew the circle about Apple's why, right? And
yes, that's exactly it. Yep.
Yeah, do you want to make computers for people to automate spreadsheets, or do you want to make delightful devices? I forget his phrasing, right? But to create enjoyable experiences for people to interact with technology, right? And the why is very important, and I appreciate how you connected that to why you get up each day to help customers with decision making.
Another classic example of that, if you think about it, is ice cream. If you think of ice cream, you think, oh, it tastes good, it's sweet, it's all of those things, which is very true. It's an emotional support system.
That's also true.
Right? That's also true. So it has my point is it has something that, it's not the feature of it, but if you think about it, why? Because it makes you feel better.
You're absolutely right.
Or if you're going with your family, you could say it helps you socialize. It has so many benefits that you didn't think of.
There are other aspects of value of ice cream than just being delicious.
Exactly.
Wonderful. I've enjoyed the discussion. How can people find out about the work that you're doing?
Sure. So you can visit our website, -research.com. And so we do have information on the website, a little bit about how to contact us. The best way, and what I do a lot of, is if you're thinking, people are thinking about situations of how I might approach, how do I do market research for product development, what type of issues, just any advice, we're more than happy to talk on a call, talk through just how would you think about it? What would I recommend? Even if we're not a good fit as a company to do it, or just we enjoy those types of communication. I'm fortunate in that our staff and our employees here, the one thing that we really try to instill and have them involved is we're passionate. When I look to hire people, I want somebody who's passionate about it. And we're very passionate about market research, and we're passionate about the topic. So we enjoy those types of communication because it's something that we care about. So.
Fantastic.
Don't be afraid to jump on the website, find our number, and give us a call.
Great. Make sure I get it right in the show notes, where listeners can find it as well. Was it amg-research.com?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, great. Chip, really appreciate you helping us have some new information about market research, how to think about it up front, how to think about the following we should do, the use of qualitative tools and the use of quantitative tools. Thanks for joining us and walking us through that.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. And
listeners, if you want to find the written article of everything we discussed, you'll find that at productmasterynow.com/504. As always, keep innovating.
Thank you for listening to Product Mastery Now, where product leaders and managers gain product mastery through practical knowledge, influence, and confidence. By listening, you are becoming a product master, creating products customers love. Find additional resources at productmasterynow.com. Keep innovating.